Elizabeth. This is a story about Elizabeth, the vintage and sensual lorry. Sadly, she was left to her rot in a shed for a long time. Find out what happened when his driver found her then. Thomas was taking a heavy goods train into a cargo ship at Brenham Docks. The ship was leaving at sundown. Thomas was working so hard to get the trucks to there on time. And suddenly, one of his coupling rods broke. His driver saw the ship by the track. I'll see if there are some tools in there, he said. Be careful, that shit looks a bit spooky, said Thomas. Then a voice came from inside the shed. Be quiet in there. I'm trying to sleep. Thomas's driver, however, went into the shed after a few moments. He came out again. Well, is it a ghost? Asked Thomas. No, laughed his driver. It's not a ghost. It's a helpful surprise. Thomas's driver and fireman took some of the coal into the shed. Thomas wondered what they were doing. She would be able to get to the fitter's yard. Thomas heard his driver say, "Hey, if her boiler holds," said his fireman, she's badly needs some repair." Thomas heard a lot of clanking noises coming from inside the shed. What could be inside? At last, out of the shed came a rather dirty old steam lorry. "Thomas, this is Elizabeth," said his driver. "So you're the little puffer that broken down," Elizabeth told Thomas. Thomas didn't like that at all. You're a rather rude old steam lorry," he replied sharply. "Actually, I'm a vintage central lorry," replied Elizabeth. "And you should be thankful that I'm here to help you." Elizabeth and Thomas's drivers went out to the fitter's yard. Elizabeth's engine made loud grinding noises as she drove up a steep hill. Her engine was getting louder and louder. "You're not built for hills," said Thomas's driver. "Will you make it?" "I'll be fine," said Elizabeth. "Oh, I'm just catching my breath." Before long, Elizabeth reached the fitter's yard. Thomas's driver fetched the new coupling rod, and they drove back to Thomas. Elizabeth felt very proud. She realized that she had been in the shed for so long, and she had forgotten how much fun it would be to help others. Thomas was impressed with how quickly Elizabeth had fetched the coupling rod. He was about to thank her when she said, "Next time, and make sure you're not careless." Now Thomas thought Elizabeth was the rudest lorry he had ever met. He just waited in silence while his driver fitted the new coupling rod, and then they set off to the docks. Elizabeth decided to follow Thomas to the docks. "That little puffer has already broken one coupling rod, he I need my help again, she thought. Elizabeth's engine rattled and roared, and as she slowly followed behind Thomas. Soon, Thomas was out of sight, but Elizabeth didn't mind. She remembered which road to take to get to the docks. Thomas arrived at the docks just in time, and the goods were unloaded. So Topham Hatt came over. He looked very cross indeed. "Where have you been?" he asked. "You nearly missed the boat." Thomas told him about the broken coupling rod. He was about to tell him about Elizabeth when she drove up. "Oh, it's you," said Elizabeth. "Sir Topham Hatt, you have learned how to drive properly yet?" Thomas thought that Sir Topham Hatt would be very angry, but he was surprised. But to his surprise, Sir Topham Hatt and Elizabeth said, "Elizabeth, the first lorry I drove. How marvelous to see you again. Where have you been?" Thomas couldn't believe it. Elizabeth and Sir Topham Hatt were friends. Elizabeth told Sir Topham Hatt that she had been left behind in the shed a long time ago, and everyone had forgotten about her. She hadn't thought that she would never drive again. Sir Topham Hatt was very pleased that Elizabeth had been found. He asked Jim Cole, the mechanic, to restore her to her original beauty. Elizabeth smiled happily and thanked Sir Topham Hatt. He could hardly wait to be in for working in order again. A few weeks later, Elizabeth drove proudly. Elizabeth drove past Sir Topham Hatt station, who knew her new paintwork shone and her engine sounded perfect. "Hello?" "Oh," she said. "You don't think my new paintwork looks marvelous?" "You're the grandest lorry in the whole railroad," said Sir Topham Hatt. Thomas had to agree, and Elizabeth was so happy to be useful again, she wasn't rude at all.